Hey guys, Drifter here. Today I have a video for you called The Superhero Problem. I admit to being a nerdy guy. I read a lot of comic books, admittedly mostly Image Comics, not Marvel or DC, and I tend to stray away from the superheroes, but I've been on a superhero kick recently. I have read a lot of superhero comics, and I've been thinking there's kind of a core problem with all of them. You can generally divide them into two types. One is the man who becomes more than a man, the simple normal human who goes out and beats up street-level crime, that kind of thing. We're talking like Batman. And then the other that's like a more like a god mythos, like a Superman or like a Wolverine who can't die or something like that. And there's a problem with both of these that I could never really wrap my head around. We're going to talk about those that fight street-level crime first. We're talking about Batman, we're talking about the Arrow, which I admit to have been watching a lot of on Netflix recently, but they're ultimately normal men. They're human beings, billionaires, mind you, that train themselves to become more than that. But there's a flaw with the concept, and that is, where do I go to fight crime? Like, if I got all the skills of Batman and all of his money, where would I go tonight to go fight crime? Where could I guarantee to make a difference every single night? What part of town is so bad that I can just stand on a rooftop and wait for somebody to get mugged and it's guaranteed to happen? And in a city that is this bad, in a city that's this desperate, that's this kind of blown up, where the police are useless, which I admit are exceedingly rare, but that tends to be the story in these type of things, people just move out. They give up. They don't deal with that, except for a very few that are stuck there. The vast majority of people just leave. They take a one-way bus ticket to anywhere else. And also, does beating up criminals even really reduce crime rates? Like, if I went super hard and hired Batman to come police my city, would it really change the crime rates that much? Maybe some, but not that much, because crime largely isn't deterred by strict punishments, and by this I'm referring to a study on drugs. No matter how much they increased the punishment, the drug use didn't change very much until you hit like Singapore level death penalties. And same kind of thing, like even increasing the death penalty for violent crimes isn't that big of a deterrent, but crime is largely created by socioeconomic problems. We know this, we've always known this. Poor people commit crimes, not because they're terrible, awful people, but because two reasons. One, because they're desperate. Sometimes you have to make food, you have to get money, you have to eat, you have some sort of sustenance to sustain yourself, and when you're super broke and you don't have a job, you'll do just about anything. And number two is for perceived inequality. Some people feel that they are not being treated fairly, that justice does not apply to all, and this does create more crime. Even if it's not true, even if you are being treated fairly, it's perceived inequality, but that's a different type of thing. But what good does a vigilante do in this situation? The people that are committing crimes because they're super broke aren't getting less broke. Those that are indoctrinated into gangs or whatever aren't being unindoctrinated. And those that feel that justice doesn't apply to them aren't actually feeling worse because now we have some guy beating up all the poor people in the bad part of town. And if Batman or Oliver Queen or who's his face, Ray Palmer or Tony Stark or all these people that are billionaires, true billionaires with giant mega corporations at their disposal, then why couldn't they just start more businesses? Couldn't we solve more crimes by creating, even if a business operates at a loss, almost like a charity really, but actual real jobs and employment and stability for the people that are most desperate? Wouldn't that curb more crime and improve the cities than doing anything? And you could always argue that these people are emotionally damaged and they like beating up others, and I would too. And there's also the problem that some crime is natural. No matter how strict you set the punishments, no matter how crazy it is, there's some things that human beings like that are illegal for various reasons that we are going to continue to do. Human beings like doing drugs and alcohol and things like that. This is largely, as I've read, to cover for emotional problems and instabilities and weaknesses. Not entirely, some people just like doing it. But this is going to happen. No matter how strict you set the controls, there are still going to be people that do drugs. And I'm going to use Singapore as an example. You get the death penalty for that in Singapore. Like, you even if you have like one tiny little bit of pot on you, you die in Singapore. It's game over. It's awful. It's scary there. But there are still areas where people sell drugs and have prostitutes and stuff like that, because it's a human natural need that we need to work out, and it does exist. And the same kind of thing with men, and to a lesser degree women. They want crazy ways to have sex and to cheat on their partners. So prostitution, and even in a city where we don't have streetwalkers, there will still be a lot of escorts, which is illegal. These things will exist because there is a big desire for them. And that's kind of one thing I liked about the Arrow. He always punished white-collar crime, at least for the first season or so, instead of going out and beating up people on the street, because white-collar criminals tend to get away with it. They do things that are barely legal and shaft hundreds of others for their self-benefit, so it's really good to see them get their other comeuppance. But that's just something that I was thinking about. Like, why don't they do any actual good instead of just beating up people? And I can apply a very similar issue, but the scale changes, to superheroes that have superpowers. Imagine that you have a superpower, a good one, an awesome one. You can think about your favorite superhero, and then imagine that you have that power. Now ask yourself, honestly, is it really worth your time to use your abilities to beat up on street-level crooks? Is it really worth, I mean, are you using your abilities to their maximum potential to fight crime with that? Couldn't you use the same amount of time or effort to do something better? I mean, imagine how long it takes to find the crime. What could you be doing in a day? If you had, say, super strength like Superman and laser eyes so you could weld things, you could build bridges, you could build public work projects, you could help create dams, you could build wells and things that would help tons and tons of people in a fraction of the time and for free that it would take a normal crew to do it. It would be great. If you had super intelligence, like many heroes do have, you could be curing diseases, you could be creating prosthetic limbs, you could be fixing cancers, you could find immortality. That's kind of a greedy one, but there's so many people suffering from diseases, and also we could be exploring space. We could do fantastic things with super intelligence. Or if you could fly, right, or you could teleport, or you could do something like that, you could be the world's best spy because you would never show up on radar, and you could just sit above people and watch them. You could gather intelligence on any evildoer in the planet. And you could if you were one of these power types, you could single-handedly put an end to wars. This war in Syria with ISIS, gone. You could topple any evil dictator you wanted. Why not free North Korea? Why go and try and arrest people on the streets and beat them up or whatever, when we could fly over to North Korea and completely eradicate that corrupt government and remove Kim Jong-un and just totally take over and free these people? Wouldn't that be a better use of your time? Or maybe a scarier way, you could use your powers to intimidate government officials and help curb or put an end to government corruption so that it works better than it has before, ever will be before. But then you run into the who watches the Watchmen problem. But maybe I wouldn't be a good superhero. Maybe I'm too dark. Maybe I think too much. Maybe I'm too hard on some... I'd probably kill people if I was a superhero. Kim Jong-un would be at the bottom of a grave right now if it was up to me. But I don't know, just something I was thinking about. That's why there's a failure. That's probably why there aren't actually superheroes, because the solutions to the problems aren't just going out and punching them to death. You have to put a lot more work into it. And guys, that's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.